what's going on? I hope this picks me up pretty good. I don't really deal with my phone microphone that often for video. I don't usually do videos like this, but it's sunny outside and I don't want to go sit in my house yet, my apartment, kind of enjoying the sun while it's out. Happy Memorial Day weekend, everybody. If you don't know, I go by Rosville. This is an unorthodox, out of the ordinary, in your car, the hot thing to do, which is really not. Podcast recording for Alliance Late Night. And hopefully this will record long enough for me to upload something of value. I don't know how much space is on my phone, but anyway, I wanted to talk this episode about my experience with professional wrestling training. I'm going to be all the way honest with you guys and kind of give you a background about me, bringing me up to the decision. So, some of you guys who I talk with and some of the other podcast chats know a little bit about my background. I am more well versed in booking for DJ events. I'm a DJ, house music DJ. Make music, mess around with making some beats here and there. I have released music years ago and some singles throughout the years. But most of my background as far as the entertainment business has been in the music side of things. 2010, I crossed over from hip-hop. I don't really know of any one reason. It was a series of events, series of things that just kind of led me in that direction. But I switched over from doing basically West Coast underground music to doing house music DJing, electro, house, pop electro, stuff like that. Basically, I was a rave DJ. I am born and raised in Seattle, but at the time I was living in a small town about 2 hours away from Seattle. They didn't have anybody else in the market doing events, booking venues, and bringing DJs to the town, so I decided to do it. Small town by the name of Aberdeen, which for some of you who are hardcore grunge followers, you know that's where Kurt Cobain's from. But nonetheless, I started doing events in the next town over. I was actually living in Aberdeen, booked a venue in the next town over, Hoquiam, and had a very successful run there. During that run, I was able to get onto a internet streaming show, video streaming show called ITV, the DJ Sessions, hosted by Darren Bruce, produced by Darren Bruce. And that gave me a lot of exposure with the DJs and the promoters that were back up in Seattle working at that time. Through my work, bada bing, bada boom, people started paying attention. I was able to bring some more DJs down to where I was at. Like I said, I had a successful run before it just became too much of a liability. I was doing 16 and up events, and it just became too much of a security issue. I did have the local police working along with me in the venue. Owner was working in conjunction with the local police department, so I had that going for me, but still, it became too much of a liability issue for me. So I went back to the Seattle market and basically wrote down a list of all the places that I wanted to DJ at based upon bookings that I had seen before, some of the venues I had been at. And I was blessed and fortunate enough to pretty much go through all the venues that I selected. Within my first 3 months of being a DJ and DJing in front of the public, I was booked out of state in Salem, Oregon for a big rave event they had down there at a fairground, I believe. DPO Productions were the people who produced that. This was years ago, like I said, 2010. I had a pretty solid run up through about 2015-ish with kind of scaling off between then and 2016. Just went in a whole different direction with life. Would skip a whole bunch of years. 2018 became sober. Still sober to this day, which has been a big turnaround in my life. Things have gotten better every day since. And I would say probably somewhere around 2021. Essentially, whenever the NWA started back up and was purchased by Billy Corgan is when I started to really get back into wrestling again. And I had to go back and do some filling in the blanks and find out what happened in the years that I was not participating as a fan in wrestling. Not just the NWA, not just independence, but professional wrestling in general. I had stopped watching Raw and SmackDown for, at that point, probably, I hadn't watched Raw or SmackDown on a regular basis since 2013 or 14 or something like that. I would jump in and out, but not enough to really follow or care too much about the storylines. But that gives you a little bit of the timeline and a little bit of my background in entertainment business. I have booked, just not in professional wrestling. There are many parallels between what I was doing and professional wrestling as I'm learning as I'm going along, which is pretty interesting to know. Even how the events are booked, security, sound, door people, pretty much all the same. But again, I started really following again when the NWA was purchased, and when Power was launched, I was all in. More of my wrestling background, I was born watching professional wrestling. I joke about it, but I say that when I came out, when I was born, the day of my birth, I told them to turn on the NWA in the hospital. It's kind of a little joke I got going on, but essentially, there's not a time period as a child that I don't recall wanting to watch and watching the National Wrestling Alliance, or wrestling in general, because I watched the National Wrestling Alliance, I watched the WWF, and I watched Glow, and I also watched Portland Wrestling whenever it would come on broadcasting up here in Washington. Now, at the time, I didn't understand the separation of that promotion from the rest of NWA. I didn't know what a territory was or any of that. I just knew that when I turned it on and it told me it was Portland Wrestling, that sometimes I saw people who were on the main show in the NWA, so to me it was all NWA. The NWA was always a favorite. It was always favored over the WWE or WWF at the time. There was clearly a difference. The National Wrestling Alliance reflected more of what looked like reality outside of my door, sometimes behind my doors. How the youth viewed ECW later in the 90s is how my generation, my age group, viewed the NWA. Like, these guys are crazy. This is the real deal. So I was always following all those guys, anybody, that you could think of from that particular era of the National Wrestling Alliance, basically from around 83 to the time that they sold and WCW and NWA separated. Yeah, the NWA was my preferred promotion. So that gives you a little bit of my professional wrestling background as far as what I was into, what I followed. And here recently, like I said, since 2018, I've lived a life of sobriety, and since then, there's been a lot of goals that I've set, and all those goals I've accomplished, and some are still ongoing, but they're goals and plans that are in action. They're ongoing. So, for anybody out there who's struggling with anything, advice is advice. You know, don't let a situation come to you that forces you to make that decision. Make the decision before something happens to you. DUI, car accident, lose a girlfriend, a wife, lose a vehicle, court fees, court costs, time in jail, all those things. Take the time to reflect on the people who are concerned about your well-being, reevaluate how you view things, and take the experiences of others to help you make the correct decision. The decision has to come from you. I just hope for anybody who's out there in any kind of addiction that it comes from you internally, because that's when you'll have the true breakthrough. So, after beginning my life of sobriety, like I said, I set out a lot of goals, and I've been accomplishing those, and something that I wanted to do all my life, well, yeah, pretty much all my life, next to making music and being a rap star, was I wanted to be a professional wrestler. An old buddy of mine, guy by the name of Mike, his brother is Gary Wolf. Gary Wolf is Pitbull #1 in ECW. And when we were in high school, it was one summer or 2 summers. I know at least one summer, he went on vacation out to Philadelphia. When he came back, the guy was huge. I mean, like, just huge. And he told me he was out there training with his brother and the other people from ECW. So he would show me some of the stuff that he learned. And, I practiced as much as I could with the environment that we were in. We didn't have a ring. We didn't even have floor mats. So it was very limited in what was shown to me. But some of the stuff that I'm learning now, I can see what he was showing me then, which is pretty cool. But I don't really know anything. So I started this podcast. I've been going since January, I believe it is. I'm about 22 weeks in, something like that. And the more I do the reviews on professional wrestling, the more I dive into the independent scene, the more I get into the behind the scenes part of the business and whatnot, the more I just felt like you've done everything else on your list. Why not give this a shot? Why not go out there and at least give it a shot? Worst case scenario, you never make it to a match, but you've gone through the ringer to have the experience to give myself a better perspective of what these athletes are doing in the ring, which will reflect in my presentation through my podcast when I'm reviewing and critiquing what I see. But I really want to wrestle. I am moving without necessarily a fallback plan. It's either I I make it or I don't. But realistically, as I just explained, that's the reality. So I'm kind of all over the place. I hope I'm not losing you. So locally, we have a few promotions up here regionally, but in Western Washington, we have two promotions. We have Defy, which operates out of Seattle mostly, but they do some shows in Tacoma at the Armory. They've gone over to Yakima and had some shows over in the Sundome, Yakima Sundome. They've produced and have played host to some great talent. You know, Darby Allin, Swerve Strickland. They've had Cobb come through. They've had Jacob Fatu come through. They've had Richard Holiday come through. Defy is one of the big dogs as far as wrestling promotions go here in Seattle. Here recently, I came across another promotion that goes by Peak Sports Entertainment, formerly known as WAC or Without a Cause. And the reason I came across them is because the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion Tom Latimer was scheduled to make an appearance. That's how I found out about this company. He was to face Brian Cook. If you're not familiar with Brian Cook, look up Peak Sports Entertainment. Look up Brian Cook versus Tom Latimer. The match is available on YouTube. Look up Peak Sports Entertainment on YouTube. You can find a match there. But this was my first exposure to this company. And, you know, prior to this show, like I said, I was already kind of thinking, you know, give it a shot. Give it a shot. But I went to that show. I went to a few other shows, and I think I've been to 4 shows now. I think the only show that I've missed since the Tom Latimer appearance was Alexander Hammerstone versus Sebastian Wolf. And the more that I've gone, the more I felt like I think I can do this. I think that I have enough in me at my age to go out there and make it through training and at the very least wrestle for a year. Because again, I have to be realistic. And I'll tell you where this is coming from as far as like a timeline and why I give myself that window. Going back to 2018 when I told you I became sober and started living a lifestyle of sobriety, I hurt myself at a campground. And the accident that I had it was drinking related. Just going to be honest with you. Somebody needs to hear this. Somebody needs to hear this. It was drinking related. I fell and hurt myself. And when I fell and hurt myself, I banged my nerves really bad. And what they call central cord syndrome. Or an acute hit, bang of your nerves going through your spine. The outcome was that I was paralyzed shortly, some 24 to 48 hours, something like that, which seemed like a longer time because I was still coming down from the drinking that I was doing at the campground, plus the medications they were pumping into me for the pain. But I could not walk. I could not ball my fists. I could not move my fingers. I could not move my right. It was on my right side. Right hand, right arm, right leg, no toe movement. Just almost like a Bell palsy kind of thing where, you know, one side of your body kind of loses its functionality. That is what happened to me. And it was my fault, nobody else's fault. By this time, I had already been contemplating cutting out the drinking, but this was the the express lane to make that happen. Like I said, don't let an accident happen to you to force you. Learn from the experiences of others and make a sound decision for yourself before you get to something like that. But I was in the hospital and I was just, everything runs through your mind. All the things that you're used to doing, this everyday normal things, you're thinking now that's gone. Or for how long, you don't know. But it could be forever. You could be like this forever. I could be walking around with a walker, a cane, just worst case scenarios, right? So I ain't gonna say anything like I found the Lord when I was in the hospital, because I've always had that connection. I was raised in a household where God was first. So for my situation, I prayed and I, reflected and processed and listened. And what kept resonating in my mind is, it was a question. If I give this ability back to you, what are you going to do? Before this, you had the ability to go take care of business, but you slept and you procrastinated and you put your energy into things that weren't moving you forward. And you had all these abilities with no worries. Now you don't have it. If I give it back to you, what are you going to do with it? So that just resonated. And in short time, after the doctors had came to me and said, we can't tell you if you're going to walk again normally, or if your body function is going to come back in that side of the body. We don't know. We can't tell you if or when. Within 48 hours, my toes started moving. They made sure I was stable. In the first part of my hospital stay, I was in the hospital for about 3 weeks. Started the physical therapy there. They had me on all kinds of pain meds, including gabapentin, which I ended up I stopped taking it. It just didn't help the situation. But I moved to another facility for inpatient rehab, and the doctor came in and said, "So, do you want to walk with a walker or do you want to walk on your own?" Of course I want to walk on my own. Said, "Get up and walk down the hall, and this is what we're going to do every day. And then we're going to go and walk these stairs, forwards and backwards, and then you're going to walk these blocks." And just put me in a situation where there was no thinking, just to do it, which has been reflective of how I operate ever since then. And the first couple years after the accident was slow going, but every day got better. The numbness and the electric shocks became less and less. My movement became better and better. For about 2 years, I could not jog. I could not jump. I had issues dragging my right foot. And definitely the strength was off. Of course, when you stop drinking, especially when you're the kind of, if you were the kind of drinker I was, you start to lose the beer weight. So your body's going through this metamorphosis at the same time. Basically, you're coming into a new body. This is a full cleansing by way of force by this accident. But I am in the condition where if you didn't know that I went through that scenario, you couldn't look at me and tell that anything ever happened. And I'm blessed to be in that situation. I'm blessed to have recovered with little to no lingering signs of that ever happening. So here I am. As of 2 weeks ago, I made the decision that you have your body mechanics, you have the ability, you have your health, you are working out, you're eating healthy, you're living right. You've been reviewing all these promotions and you've seen all these different kinds of professional wrestlers of all levels. Don't you think you can go and do it? And my answer to myself was yes. So I had some conversations going on with a couple guys at Peak Sports, which I have been reviewing over the last few months. And somebody just sent me the link to get in contact with DRGNPLEX Dojo, which is the school for Peak Sports Entertainment. And I'm in there. I went with the expectations. You're at zero. You're at the ground level. You don't know nothing. Doesn't matter that you talk about wrestling. Doesn't matter how many years you've been watching wrestling. You've never been in it. You've never ran the ropes before. You've never fallen and hit the mat. You've never been hit by a drop kick or executed a drop kick or arm drag. You're at zero. Go in there with the mindset to absorb and soak up everything that you need to know in order to fulfill and live a lifelong dream, which is to, even if for a short period of time, like I said, to be a professional wrestler. Next week will be my third training session. Due to work issues, I can only participate in one training a week. I would really like to do the two, but rent, right? But so far, my review of Dojo, the DRGNPLEX Dojo, welcoming, supportive, positive reinforcement, corrective with respect, but concise in explanation for reasons. I have not felt like a number in this scenario, if you understand what I'm saying. I don't feel like I'm just another person there. I don't feel like I'm just being taken for my money. I feel like the instructors, the owner, the instructors, with his oversight, are explaining what needs to be explained in order for me to understand what I'm supposed to be doing. I can tell that they understand that I have some knowledge of professional wrestling. I guess aptitude is the word. That I'm knowledgeable, that I'm not somebody who just turned to wrestling one day and said, oh, I want to do that, but I don't know anything. I believe they can tell that there's definitely some knowledge that I have. But again, that's only from my couch. That's only from me being a watcher, a spectator. I don't have a whole bunch of athletic background. I didn't play football in high school. I didn't go to college, so I didn't play any sports in college. The level of experience sports-wise that I have is basketball in my middle school years. I tried out in high school, It's not what I wanted to do. I practiced with the baseball squad, but I never officially was part of the team. And sophomore year, it was a wrap. My mindset was, I know everything, and as soon as I turn 18, I'm out of the house, and, coulda, shoulda, woulda, but here I am today. I'm grasping a lot of what I'm learning, but what I do understand, the more I repeat, the more I will retain, and the more it will become fluent. It's just like with anything else, with any other job. Um, Repetitiveness, consistency, it becoming muscle memory. It's the same. It's the same thing. The only difference between this and flipping burgers or pushing boxes at a warehouse is that this is a physical thing on your body. Granted, pushing boxes can be too, but you're not, getting knocked backwards on your back in a warehouse. So um, conditioning. My level of conditioning before getting into this training at the dojo was little. It's pretty minimal. My day job consists of me being on my feet and probably walking the length of in any given day 10 football fields. So I'm constantly on my feet. So as far as moving and cardio, I guess if you wanted to call it that, even though I'm not jogging, that would be that attribute in that area, or contribution, however you want to say it. I had been in the gym prior to getting into the training, so I've put on a little bit of muscle. I've put on a little bit of weight. I'm continuing to do so. Fortunately, where I live, I have a little weight room on the premises. I use that pretty often, except when there's a lot of people in there and they're in my way. I still go and do about 45 minutes to an hour, but it's not as much as I want to do. I want to dedicate like 2 hours every time that I'm in the gym because I want to see more gains quicker. But I'm still nonetheless moving forward in that area. How do I feel physically after just 2 sessions? Like I was telling somebody I was talking to about being in training,